Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget, and I'm here with Jordan and Hernali. We're so excited to walk you through our analysis of the OpenAI case study. The case is especially interesting because it sits right at the intersection of product development and marketing strategy. It forces us to think about the product roadmap as a marketing strategy. In platform businesses, feature decisions are also segmentation decisions, pricing decisions, and positioning decisions. It's so much of what we've learned about and discussed together as a group so far. Here's how we're going to walk through the case. I'll be setting the stage. I'll walk through a quick background on ChatGPT, the competitive landscape, and our situation analysis. Jordan will walk through the strategic options and our recommendation, and Hernali will close us out strong with an implementation plan and the marketing strategy. Before we get into the case, a little context on what we're actually talking about. Most of you probably know ChatGPT by now. It is an app built on a large language model, which is a technical way of saying it's an AI that you can have a conversation with in plain language. There's no coding, there's no special training. You just type and it responds. The underlying technology goes back to 2018, but ChatGPT as a consumer product, something that anyone could just open and talk to, launched on November 30th, 2022, and it took the market by storm. The numbers on this slide tell that story. There's 180 million users and 100 million of them coming back every single week. 1.3 billion with a B annual revenue, almost entirely from one $20 a month subscription. This product category basically didn't even exist before ChatGPT showed up. But despite all of that, the pressure was building. By April 2024, the rate of improvement had slowed and competitors were closing in. Google embeds Gemini directly into Gmail, Docs, Android, surfaces that hundreds of millions of people already in or go in every single day. And while they don't mention this in the case explicitly, we know that Microsoft does the same thing with Copilot inside of Office and Teams. But ChatGPT requires users to make an active choice to go there, and that's a structural disadvantage. It's not a feature problem, it's a distribution problem. And that distinction matters a lot for where this case goes. That's the world we enter here with the ChatGPT case. Envious numbers, fragile foundations, and a narrowing window to secure the durable market leadership. So now let's meet the people involved. Xander Griffin is head of consumer innovation at OpenAI in April 2024, so just about 2 years ago. He's the one responsible for figuring out what ChatGPT actually becomes next. And he's got a roadmap review with the CEO and founder in about a week. The timeline on the left tells you why the pressure is real. ChatGPT runs on what's called a tick-tock cadence, one major talk release every 12 to 18 months, with smaller tick releases in between. ChatGPT at this time was the last major talk back in March 2023. So for Xander Griffin, the next big swing was overdue. So the question on his desk wasn't just what features should ChatGPT 5 have, it was harder than that. It's really what should ChatGPT position itself to become? Was it a consumer assistant, an enterprise platform, something else entirely? Whatever direction he picks, he had to think about what customers he was prioritizing. Here's a moment that sort of stops you in your tracks when you were reading this case. Griffin doesn't just sit down and write out a roadmap based on everything he knows as an expert in the industry. He opened ChatGPT 4, which was the current model at the time, and prompts it to design its own successor. He asks the AI to build the roadmap for the thing that is supposed to replace it. And the model actually comes back with something coherent, 5 strategic themes and a sprint plan and a reasonable structure. Griffin read it, and a direct quote from the case is, "Pretty good start. My baby has really grown up." But here's what it couldn't do. No, it had no sense of what customers to prioritize. It didn't talk about distribution. It didn't answer the question of what it should actually become. It just generated a list of things that could be built. It had no framework for what should be built or for whom or in what order. So that gap between what the AI produced and what Griffin still had to decide is really the entire case. So as we move into the situation analysis, the first place we want to start is with our customers. Because before you can build a roadmap, you have to know who you're building for. The AI generated roadmap treated ChatGPT's 180 million users really as one undifferentiated market. But in reality, there are three very different user groups who all prioritize different things. Consumers are the base, everyday writing, research, productivity, people like you and me, maybe. And their why ChatGPT has 180 million users. But they or we're not really the big money. Enterprises are the money. Workflow automation, coding, knowledge management. They want reliability, security, and measurable ROI. They come in through a pretty manual sales process and they pay significantly more per customer than anyone else on this slide. And that's where the real revenue ceiling is. And then there's a segment that's easy to overlook, developers. They're not using ChatGPT themselves, they're building on top of it. They're building apps, services, and custom tools. They extend ChatGPT into markets that OpenAI could never reach alone. And they're really the ecosystem play. The reason this slide matters is this bottom line. The roadmap cannot serve all three equally. Every feature decision, every release priority, every pricing move, it's implicitly a choice about which of these three you're optimizing for. Griffin has to sequence them deliberately, and that sequencing decision is what the rest of this presentation is about. Now let's look at the competitive landscape and what the other people are doing. On the left, you've got the competitive field, Gemini, Claude, Llama, Perplexity, and Mistral. The threat ratings here are our own assessment. The case doesn't rank them like this, but they're grounded in what the case tells us about each competitor's strength and market position. The threat ratings aren't all high for the same reason either. Gemini is high because of accuracy and ecosystem integration. Llama is high because it's highly scalable and easily integrated within existing systems. So it's really low friction for anyone who wants to build on top of it. But again, we figure that the biggest threat isn't really about features at all. It's about distribution and how people will access these tools. The case focuses on Google as the primary distribution threat. Google has Gmail, Docs, and Android, and Gemini doesn't need users to come to it. It's already where they are. ChatGPT requires users to make an active choice to show up every time. That is what we're calling the structural disadvantage. And while the case doesn't address it directly, we add that the Microsoft Copilot presents the exact same threat. It's baked directly into Office and Teams, which is the software stack most enterprise workflows already run on. But again, that's our read, not the cases. So you can't feature your way out of a distribution problem, which is exactly why Griffin's decision isn't really about what to build, it's about how to change the battlefield entirely. When we step back and evaluate the situation, a few patterns emerge. Our SWOT draws directly from the case, and we supplemented it with some additional reporting from the New York Times, Axios, and NPR. ChatGPT has major strengths: strong brand recognition, a massive user base, and a powerful developer ecosystem. But there are also real weaknesses, including hallucination risks that I'm sure we're all familiar with, that create real trust barriers, especially in the enterprise environments. At the same time, OpenAI has important opportunities through the GPT store ecosystem and deeper enterprise adoption. But those opportunities exist alongside serious threats from competitors with stronger distribution advantages. So when you look at all of that together, the analysis points to really three core issues. First, a distribution disadvantage. Competitors like Google and Microsoft are embedded inside tools people already use every day. Second, there's monetization concentration. Almost all of OpenAI's revenue comes from a single $20 a month subscription. The numbers are impressive there, but it's a really fragile foundation. And third, there is no segmentation logic in the AI generated roadmap. Consumers, enterprises, and developers all want completely different things, but the roadmap Griffin got back treated those 180 million users really as one undifferentiated market. So together, these three issues lead to the central strategic question of the case. What should ChatGPT position itself to become? And the answer requires a clear choice about what role ChatGPT plays in the ecosystem: product, platform, or infrastructure. So Jordan is going to walk us through these three strategic options and read you into our recommendation. Jordan, I will pass it to you.
Thanks, Bridget. If we move on to the next slide, Bridget just walked us through the market context and the competitive dynamic shaping OpenAI's decision. If we step back from that analysis, the core question becomes a little bit clearer. The decision Griffin is facing is not simply about what new features GPT-5 should have. Instead, it's the team is really deciding how ChatGPT should position itself within the broader AI ecosystem. First, based on the case, we see three possible strategic directions. First, ChatGPT could position itself primarily as a consumer AI assistant, focusing on creativity, personalization, and everyday productivity. Second, it could evolve into an enterprise productivity platform, prioritizing reliability and deep integration with business workflows. Or third, ChatGPT could become a platform ecosystem where developers and companies build applications on top of the OpenAI model. Each of these options leads to a very different competitive strategy and product roadmap. Moving on, the first option um, would be to continue positioning ChatGPT primarily as a consumer AI assistant. This strategy would emphasize multi-module interactions, personalizations, and creative tools that enhance everyday productivity. These are the type of features that drive high engagement and viral adoption. The advantage of this approach is that ChatGPT already has a strong consumer adoption and brand recognition, which could continue to fuel rapid user growth. However, the downside is monetization. Consumer application typically generates far less revenue per user than enterprise software. Additionally, OpenAI would still face a structural distribution disadvantage compared to companies like Google and Microsoft, which already control many of the interfaces consumers use every day. Moving on to option two, would be to position ChatGPT primarily as an enterprise productivity platform. This strategy would prioritize reliability, accuracy, and deep integration with enterprise workflows. ChatGPT could support tasks such as coding assistance, research support, internal knowledge management, and automation. The benefit of this approach is strong revenue potential. Enterprise customers often are willing to pay significantly more for productivity tools that improve efficiency. However, this strategy also creates a major competitive challenge. Microsoft already has deep distribution advantages in enterprise environments through Office, Teams, and Windows, and its Copilot product embedded directly into those tools. Competing head to head against that level of distribution would be extremely difficult. So, moving on to our recommended strategy, after evaluating the alternatives, our recommendation is that OpenAI should pursue a platform ecosystem strategy. Instead of positioning ChatGPT purely as a consumer assistant or enterprise productivity tool, OpenAI should position ChatGPT as a platform layer that developers and organizations build on top of. This strategy directly addresses OpenAI's biggest structural challenge, which is distribution. Companies like Google and Microsoft already control the digital environments that people interact with every day, including search engines, operating systems, and productivity software. Rather than competing directly within those environments, the platform strategy changes the competitive dynamic. By enabling developers and companies to build applications on top of OpenAI's models, ChatGPT can expand through an ecosystem rather than relying solely on its own distribution. This creates a powerful network effect. As more users join the platform, it attracts more developers. As more developers build applications, the platform becomes more valuable, and that increased value attracts even more users. Over time, this cycle creates a growth flywheel that is much harder for competitors to replicate. In this model, ChatGPT evolves from being a single product into becoming a foundational layer in the broader AI ecosystem. Transitioning over to the product roadmap, once the strategic direction is defined, the product roadmap can be structured to support that strategy. The first release, ChatGPT 5, should focus on accuracy and reliability, helping to build trust with the enterprise users. The second release, GPT-5 Turbo, should emphasize integration and developer tools, making it easier for companies and developers to build applications on top of the platform. And then finally, GPT 5.5 should prioritize multi-module capacities and personalizations, expanding consumer engagement and bringing more users into the ecosystem. By sequencing the roadmap in this way, OpenAI first establishes trust, then enables an ecosystem for expansion, and finally drives broader adoption. This sequencing supports the broader platform strategy by strengthening each stage of the ecosystem's growth. The next question is how OpenAI will actually execute upon this strategy in the marketplace, and Hernani is going to walk us through that implementation.
Thank you, Jordan. To implement the platform ecosystem strategy effectively, we can look at the classic marketing framework known as the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. Starting with product, the roadmap should follow a logical sequence. GPT-5 should focus heavily on improving accuracy and reliability, which is essential for building trust with enterprise customers. GPT-5 Turbo can then focus on integration and developers' tools, making it easy for companies to embed AI into their workflow. Finally, GPT 5.5 can emphasize multimodal capacities and personalizations, which will maintain a strong engagement among consumers. Next is price. OpenAI should strengthen the differentiation between its product tiers, such as Free, Plus, Team, and Enterprise. The goal is not only to increase the number of users, but also to improve average revenue per user, especially through enterprise contracts. The third element is place, or distribution. Since OpenAI cannot match the built-in distribution advantage of companies like Google and Microsoft, it must expand distribution through its ecosystem. That means investing heavily in developers' tools, APIs, and the GPT store, so third-party developers can build applications that extend the platform into many different markets. Finally, there is promotion. Messaging should be tailored to different audiences. For enterprise customers, the emphasis should be trust and reliability. For developers, the focus should be flexibility and monetization opportunities. And for consumers, the messenger should highlight creativity, personalization, and innovation. Together, these elements align the product roadmap with the broader marketing strategy. This brings us to the final takeaway from the case, the conclusion. In conclusion, the ChatGPT roadmap challenge highlights an important strategy lesson about technology platforms. When Griffin asked GPT-4 to generate ideas for its own successor, the AI produced several interesting development teams. However, it could not fully understand the broader market context. The model created a list of features, but it lacked segmentation logic, competitivity analysis, and prioritization. This demonstrates why strategy decision-making still requires human judgment. The platform ecosystem strategy works because it addresses the biggest structural challenge OpenAI faces: distribution, rather than competing directly with companies like Google or Microsoft on their own platform. OpenAI can position ChatGPT as the functional AI layer that other developers and companies build upon. This creates a compounding effect. More developers lead to more applications, which attracts more users, which then attract even more developers. Ultimately, the key insight from the case is that the platform markets. The product roadmap is the marketing strategy. The decision about features, integrations, and capabilities are also decisions about segmentation, position, and long-term competitive advantage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.